The SOS message, though brief, was unmistakable in its urgency. Its frequency was unlike anything humanity had encountered before, an ancient, cryptic signal that cracked through the radio waves with haunting clarity. It was broadcast in a language humans couldn't understand, but the desperation was evident. The Zorvans, a species unknown to Earth, had reached out with a message too important to ignore. But the question loomed large. Why now? And why Earth? The global summit convened in the United Nations was a mix of hope and skepticism. Representatives from every nation filled the massive conference room, their faces a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. Diplomatic envoys from other galactic powers had already made their disinterest known, calling the Zorvan distress signal a trap, a plea to drag humanity into a war that would inevitably be lost. This could be a trap, General Donovan of the United Earth Forces said, his voice cold and methodical. The Zorvans are unknowns. We know nothing of their capabilities, and to throw ourselves into an interstellar conflict without understanding the consequences would be suicide. But others in the room were less hesitant. Dr. Isabel Torres, a renowned astrobiologist, stood, her eyes sharp with conviction. We can't ignore a plea for help. This is humanity's moment to define who we are in the cosmos. Do we hide from the unknown, or do we reach out to stand with those who might need us? Her words hung in the air, and the room fell into a heavy silence. Humanity's history was one of perseverance, of fighting for the survival of the species, and this, perhaps, was another test. A new beginning, not defined by fear, but by action. The decision was reached after hours of debate. Humanity would respond. The U.S. Tempest, a state-of-the-art warship equipped with the latest human technology, would be dispatched to answer the Zorvans' call for help. Captain Alexander Hale was summoned from his post aboard the Tempest to lead the mission. Hale was a man with a reputation for tactical brilliance, a leader whose decisions in the heat of battle had saved countless lives. His experience was invaluable, but it was his unwavering sense of duty and loyalty to his crew that made him the perfect choice for the mission. On the day of the announcement, Hale stood on the bridge of the Tempest, gazing out at the stars. He had no idea what lay ahead. The Zorvans were as much a mystery as the Hedgemen, the enemies they had yet to encounter. What he did know was that this was no ordinary mission. It wasn't just about military might or victory. It was about saving a civilization, and maybe, just maybe, saving humanity's place in the universe. His first orders were clear. Prepare the crew for a journey into unknown space, gather every piece of intelligence they could find on the Zorvans, and most importantly, ensure the mission would succeed, no matter the cost. The signal had been answered. And now, humanity was preparing to cross the threshold into the galaxy, leaving Earth behind, ready to face whatever awaited them. With the fate of another species hanging in the balance, Captain Hale and his crew would soon find themselves at the forefront of a conflict that would shape the future of the cosmos. As the Tempest prepared for launch, Hale couldn't help but wonder, would humanity rise to the occasion? Or would they be crushed under the weight of their own ambition? The U.S. Tempest hummed to life in the orbital dock, its sleek form bathed in the blue glow of Earth's atmosphere. Inside, Captain Hale moved through the narrow corridors, his thoughts consumed by the unknowns ahead. The mission was daunting, the stakes higher than any he'd faced before. This wasn't just a standard rescue operation. It was humanity's first step into the unknown expanse of space, where alliances and enemies were born in the blink of an eye. The fate of a whole alien species rested on their shoulders, but more than that, humanity's very place in the galaxy was being defined in real time. As the crew assembled in the briefing room, Hale took a moment to observe them. They were a mixture of the best Earth had to offer, experts in their fields, soldiers who had seen battle, and scientists eager to understand the universe. But each one of them was also a human being with doubts, fears, and their own personal struggles. He'd have to forge them into a unit capable of overcoming not only alien forces, but their own hesitations. Lieutenant John Granger, his eyes still holding the coldness of someone who had seen too many wars, stood at the far end of the room, arms folded, his jaw clenched. Granger was a master tactician, but had the burden of a haunted past. Hale knew his past would come to light soon enough, and he'd have to face it head-on in the field. But for now, he had a job to do. "Everyone's here," Hale said, his voice carrying authority, yet undercut with the weight of what lay ahead. "Listen up. We're on a clock. The Zorvans need us, and we're their last hope. But make no mistake, this mission is not without risk. We don't know what we're going to face once we get there, but we're going to be ready for anything. That means training. That means understanding our allies and enemies. That means staying sharp." Dr. Emily Zhao, a brilliant alien linguist and communication expert, nodded solemnly. "We're also going to need to learn their language as quickly as possible. We can't help if we can't understand them. And we don't have much time. I'll need all the resources we can gather on the Zorvans' communication methods, and I'll be working with the AI systems to decode everything from their message to any patterns we find on their homeworld." "Good," Hale said, meeting her gaze. "You've got what you need. And remember, understanding them could be as important as defeating the enemy. Let's not forget, they're not just another species in trouble. They could be powerful allies if we can prove ourselves worthy." The ship's chief engineer, Commander Lucas Finch, looked up from the engineering console, his face etched with concern. "We'll need to make sure the Tempest is ready for battle and for deep space travel. The alien threat is unknown, but I can't help feeling like we might be walking into a hornet's nest. If we don't have the ship's systems fully optimized, we'll be sitting ducks." "Understood," Hale said. "I don't need to tell you what's on the line. Make it happen." The meeting continued with each department outlining their plans and contingencies, but there was an undercurrent of tension. The crew had all agreed to this mission, but the weight of what they were about to do was starting to settle in. As Hale watched his crew prepare, his mind raced. Could humanity really make a difference in a galaxy filled with unknowns? Would they rise above their limitations, or would they be crushed under the weight of the enemy's might? He couldn't afford to let doubts creep in, not now. The countdown to departure began. As the crew suited up and took their stations, the Tempest began its launch sequence, ready to carry them into the stars. The unknown stretched out before them, a void waiting to be filled with their decisions. Hale took one final look out the observation window, seeing Earth growing smaller with every passing second. The mission had begun. They were no longer just defending Earth. They were now part of a much bigger story, and the universe was watching. The stars stretched out before them, an endless sea of light and darkness. The U.S. Tempest sliced through the vacuum of space at incredible speeds, its engines humming steadily. Captain Hale stood on the bridge, staring out at the vast expanse, his thoughts far from the stars. The crew had barely begun their journey, and already, Hale could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on him. "We're moving out of Earth's orbit, sir," Lieutenant Granger called from his station, his voice steady but with a hint of uncertainty. "Make sure the course is locked in," Hale responded, his voice firm. "No turning back now." As the Tempest powered through the final stretch of human-controlled space, the crew settled into their roles. The atmosphere was tense, filled with an undercurrent of anticipation and anxiety. They were about to venture into unknown space, with nothing but their training and each other to rely on. Dr. Zhao was seated at one of the communication consoles, her fingers flying over the interface as she worked on decoding the alien distress signal. Her eyes narrowed in concentration as she attempted to translate the encrypted message that had started it all. She had reviewed the transmission countless times, but something about it didn't sit right with her. The Zorvans were a species that had existed for millennia, yet their technology seemed oddly archaic in comparison to the galactic powers they were up against. "There's something off about this signal," Zhao muttered under her breath. "It's almost like they knew they'd be wiped out. But why would they send such a risky, open signal unless they had no other choice?" Hale's brow furrowed as he overheard her words. "Keep working on it, Dr. Zhao. We need to know exactly what we're walking into." Lieutenant Granger looked up from his tactical screens, his expression unreadable. If they were desperate enough to send a message this direct, we're probably dealing with an enemy that doesn't care about protocol. Whatever's coming, it's not going to be easy. Zhao paused, her fingers hovering over the controls. "That's the part I don't understand. Why Earth? Why us? It doesn't make sense that a species with no other allies would reach out to humanity." Hale turned to her, his voice low. "Maybe they know something we don't. Maybe they've seen something in humanity's past. Our history, our resolve, that convinced them we might be their last hope. We'll find out soon enough." As they traveled deeper into the galaxy, the days blurred together. The Tempest was equipped with state-of-the-art systems, but long space voyages were still grueling. The crew found themselves growing accustomed to the monotony of deep space travel, hours of routine checks, briefings, and simulations, though it did little to ease the tension in the air. Night after night, Hale would find himself standing in the observation room, staring out at the cold void. He had grown used to the isolation of space, but this was different. This time, the silence of space wasn't just about distance from Earth, it was about what lay ahead. The Zorvan's SOS had promised danger, and Hale knew that once they reached their destination, there would be no turning back. The final leg of the journey passed in tense silence. They were nearing the coordinates of the Zorvan homeworld. All the crew could do now was prepare. "There's no turning back," Granger said quietly to Hale as he joined him in the observation room. The soft hum of the engines was the only sound in the otherwise still bridge. "I know," Hale replied, his voice steady. "But we have a job to do. And if we're going to make it through this, we need to be ready for anything. All of us." As they neared the edge of the Zorvan system, the atmosphere on board the Tempest shifted. A subtle but palpable tension gripped the crew. They had no idea what to expect, but they were all acutely aware of one thing. Humanity's place in the galaxy was about to change forever. The stars outside the ship's windows began to shift, and the first signs of the Zorvan homeworld appeared on the scanners, a small, yet vibrant planet on the edge of their system, its surface dotted with cities and strange, sprawling landscapes. "Captain," Granger called, his voice cutting through the silence, "we're entering the Zorvan system. I'm picking up hostile ships on the outer perimeter. They're already preparing for something." Hale's pulse quickened, but his face remained stoic. "It's begun. All hands, prepare for contact. This is what we came for." The Tempest slid into the heart of the Zorvan system, their destination now clear. The unknowns loomed larger than ever, but there was no turning back now. Humanity had answered the call. The U.S. Tempest cruised deeper into the Zorvan system, the quiet hum of the ship's engines, the only sound on the bridge. Captain Hale stood before the viewports, his gaze fixed on the sprawling planet ahead. It was beautiful in a raw, untamed way. The surface was a mosaic of sprawling cities and untamed wilderness, yet beneath the surface, Hale could feel the growing tension. Something was wrong. "We're picking up unusual energy readings," Granger reported from his station, his fingers tapping rapidly over the console. "It's coming from the planet's northern continent. The Zorvans are mobilizing." "Any signs of the hegemon?" Hale asked, his voice low, every muscle on alert. "Negative. But something's off," Granger responded, eyes narrowing as he scrutinized the data. "The Zorvan signals are all over the place. It looks like they're scrambling, trying to organize a defense, but they're too disjointed." Dr. Zhao leaned in from her console, her brow furrowed as she read the same data. The Zorvans aren't just fighting a single enemy. They're fighting on multiple fronts. There's no unity in their communications. It's chaotic, and it's like they're trying to prepare for something worse. Hale exhaled slowly, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His instincts told him that the Zorvans were on the brink of collapse, and whatever was coming next would be their final stand. And yet the message had been clear: we need your help. Granger, set a course for the northern continent. Prepare for an orbital insertion. Zhao, can you decrypt any kind of military strategy from their scrambled communications? I'll do my best, Zhou said, already diving back into the cryptic transmissions. If I can access their central network, we might have a shot at predicting their next move. As the Tempest made its way toward the planet's surface, Hale felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. This wasn't just about military tactics anymore. It was about protecting a species on the verge of extinction. And if humanity failed, the galaxy would lose a crucial ally in the fight against the hegemon. The crew had only just begun their mission, and already the battle for survival was upon them. Within minutes, the Tempest broke through the upper atmosphere, its hull rattling under the stress of atmospheric entry. As the ship leveled out, Hale could see the planet's surface in all its beauty and devastation. Thick, dark clouds hung over the northern continent, the signs of a world on the brink of collapse. The landscape beneath them was scared, craters and fires marking the place where the Zorvans had already been fighting a losing battle. Suddenly, a warning alarm blared on the bridge, cutting through the tension. "Captain, we've got incoming," Granger shouted, pointing to the tactical display. "Multiple hostile vessels, all bearing hegemon insignia. They're closing in fast." The hegemon had arrived. Without warning, massive enemy ships, dark and imposing, emerged from behind the planet's moons, their sheer size dwarfing the Tempest. They were here to finish what they had started. "Brace for impact," Hale ordered, his voice commanding as he gripped the edge of the console. The Tempest shuddered as enemy fire collided with the shields, the ship's defenses holding for now, but only just. Red lights flashed throughout the ship, signaling multiple system breaches, but Hale knew they couldn't afford to fall back. Not now. "Launch all fighters. Protect the landing zone," Hale barked. The ship's hangars opened, releasing the squadron of human-made fighter crafts that immediately dove toward the enemy ships. "Zhao, any luck with the Zorvans?" Hale called, his eyes never leaving the chaos unfolding on the screens before him. "I'm still trying to get a read on their central communications," Zhao answered, her voice strained. "But I'm unlocking some codes. Their planetary defense grid is still operational. We could use it against them if we can coordinate. Granger, can you keep the enemy ships distracted long enough for us to get to their defense grid?" "Just leave it to me," Granger responded with grim determination. His fingers danced over the controls, and the Tempest surged forward, its weapon system coming online. The ship's guns fired in a blaze of light, striking one of the enemy ships. It was a direct hit, but the enemy's armor absorbed the blow. Still, the battle had only just begun. As the battle raged outside, Hale knew that this would be no easy victory. But if they could break through, they could turn the tide. If they couldn't, they'd lose everything. Not just the Zorvans, but humanity's first real chance at carving out a place in the galaxy. "Keep pushing forward," Hale shouted over the din of alarms and gunfire. "We fight for every inch. We can't afford to lose." The battle raged around the Tempest as the hegemon forces closed in. The air was thick with tension, the creaking of metal reverberating through the ship as it dodged incoming fire. Captain Hale stood firmly at the bridge's helm, his gaze sharp, calculating every move with military precision. The Tempest had taken a few hits, but their shields were holding for now. However, he knew it wouldn't last. "Damage report," Hale barked. "Shields holding at 48%, reported Lieutenant Granger, his eyes glued to the tactical display. "Hull integrity compromised in multiple sectors. We've got to get out of here, or we'll be sitting ducks." "Not an option," Hale responded. His eyes narrowed as he watched the enemy ships advance. The hegemon had underestimated humanity before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. "We're not leaving without getting the Zorvans the help they need." Hale turned to Dr. Zhao, who was still working furiously at her station. "How close are we to unlocking their defense grid codes?" "I've got partial access," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "I can tap into their planetary defense network, but I need time. And we don't have much of that." A fresh volley of fire struck the Tempest, and the ship lurched violently. The crew braced themselves as alarms blared, signaling new breaches in the hull. "We need to buy Joe time," Hale said, his voice steady but edged with urgency. "Granger, can we launch another strike against their fleet?" Granger's eyes flicked to the screens, assessing the situation. "We've got a small window, but I'll need every fighter we have left. The Hedgeman's fleet is about to overwhelm us." "Then we give them everything we've got," Hale ordered. "Launch the reserve fighters. And don't stop until we've taken out their lead ships." The bridge came alive with activity as fighter pilots scrambled to their stations, launching in a flurry of motion. The squadron of sleek, human-made interceptors shot into the void, weaving between the massive Hedgeman ships, launching missile after missile in a desperate attempt to break their formation. The Tempest fired relentlessly, its weapons tearing through the enemy fleet, but it was clear they were outnumbered. Outside the ship, the space around them seemed like an apocalyptic battleground. Explosions erupted as fighters collided with enemy ships, some of them falling to the sheer firepower of the Hedgeman, but others, like the Tempest, were still in the fight. "I've got access to their defense grid," Zhao shouted from the console, her voice rising with excitement. "I can activate the main weapons array. It's not a perfect solution, but it'll give us a fighting chance." "Do it," Hale commanded, his tone fierce. Zhao's fingers flew over the console as she patched into the planetary system's weapons. There was a moment of tense silence, and then, with a sudden burst of energy, the Zorvan's planetary defenses came online. A massive cannon emerged from the surface of the northern continent, powered by the core of the planet itself. The energy beams from the cannon erupted into space, striking one of the Hedgeman's flagship vessels dead on. The enemy ship shuddered under the blast and began to break apart, sending debris scattering in all directions. The crew on the Tempest cheered, but Hale knew this was only a temporary victory. The battle was far from over. The Hedgeman had more ships, more power, and they would not retreat easily. "We've got a chance," Granger yelled, locking onto another enemy vessel with a targeting system. "We need to press the advantage." The Tempest veered toward the remaining Hedgeman forces, unleashing everything in its arsenal. The fight had escalated into chaos, but there was one thing Hale knew for sure. Humanity's fire had caught the attention of the galaxy, and they were not going down without a fight. "Zhao, keep that defense grid online," Hale ordered as the ship rumbled with another strike. "Granger, do whatever it takes to keep us in this fight. We're not leaving without ensuring the Zorvans survive." The next few moments passed in a blur of gunfire, explosions, and desperate maneuvers. Every fighter, every cannon blast, was an attempt to hold the line. The enemy fleet was beginning to waver, but Hale knew it wouldn't be long before the Hedgeman launched a final decisive counterattack. They were on the edge of victory and on the brink of total destruction. The final push would be brutal, but Captain Hale had made one promise: humanity would fight with everything they had. And as the Zorvan planet's defense system pulsed with new life, he knew they had one shot to turn the tide. "Everyone, hold fast," Hale shouted, his voice booming across the bridge. "We end this now." The Tempest rocked violently as another blast from the Hedgeman fleet slammed into its shields. The light on the bridge flickered, and alarms screamed in every corner of the ship. Captain Hale gripped the edge of his command chair, his knuckles white. The crew was exhausted, every one of them battered from the onslaught of enemy fire. Yet they held their ground, knowing that the fate of the Zorvans, and possibly humanity itself, hung in the balance. "Shields at 22%, Granger reported, his voice tight with urgency. "Hull integrity at 35%. We can't take another hit like that." Hale's mind raced. The Tempest had sustained damage to its engines and weapon systems, but it was still functional, still fighting. The planetary defense cannon had taken out one of the Hegemon's flagships, but the remaining fleet was closing in fast, relentless in its pursuit. The Zorvan's defense grid had given them a brief edge, but now they were on their own. "Zhao, can you reroute more power to the shields?" Hale asked, his voice low but urgent. "We need more time. We can't break through their lines with what we have left." Zhao's fingers flew across the console as she worked to maximize their defenses. "I'm doing what I can, Captain. It's not much, but it's enough to hold for a little longer. But their reinforcements are inbound. We're not going to last if we don't finish this now." Outside the Tempest, the battle continued to rage, a chaotic dance of destruction in the void. Explosions rocked the surrounding space as human and Hegemon ships clashed, a brutal exchange of firepower that seemed never-ending. The Zorvan's defense grid continued to fire, but their planetary weapon was not invincible. The Hegemon's fleet had adapted, concentrating their fire on the defense cannon, weakening it bit by bit. "We've lost 3 more fighters," Granger shouted, his eyes locked on the tactical readouts. "We're down to a handful of ships. If we don't break through now, we'll be sitting targets." Hale clenched his jaw. He knew this moment would come, the point where humanity's will would be tested to its breaking point. If they couldn't find a way to end this battle, the Tempest and its crew would be reduced to rubble, and the Zorvans would be doomed to fall to the Hegemon. Then, in the midst of the chaos, a voice cut through the tension. "Captain Hale," came Dr. Zhou's voice, shaky but filled with a strange sense of resolve. "I think I've found something. The Zorvan's defense grid. It's connected to a larger network beneath the surface of the planet. If we can target the core, we could disrupt the entire planetary defense system." Hale's mind whirled, the possibilities flooding him. "How long until you can get the coordinates?" "I can get them now," Zhao replied, quickly running the calculations. "But we need to strike while their fleet is distracted, or we risk being overrun before we can deliver a killing blow." Granger, ever the strategist, leaned in. "We can do that. If we concentrate our fire on their flagship and draw the rest of their forces in, we can give Zhao the opening she needs." "Do it," Hale commanded, his voice decisive. "I'll handle the rest." The crew sprang into action. Granger immediately rerouted all remaining fighter support to strike the Hegemon's flagship, while Hale focused on keeping the Tempest moving. The ship lurched as it made a sharp turn, dodging incoming fire while simultaneously unleashing its own barrage at the enemy fleet. The Hegemon flagship, massive and imposing, fired back, but its attacks lacked precision, focusing instead on taking down the Tempest in one final push. The Tempest's cannons roared to life, battering the flagship's shields and hull, drawing the attention of several enemy vessels. The distraction was enough for Zhao to lock in the coordinates she needed. "I've got it," Zhao shouted, her voice filled with a rush of triumph. "Sending the coordinates to the targeting system now. Captain, it's all up to you." Hale's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the tactical display. The timing had to be perfect. They were all running on borrowed time, and any misstep would mean the end for them all. "Granger, how's the flagship?" Hale asked, his focus never wavering. "We've done significant damage, but they're still firing back," Granger replied, frustration evident in his voice. "But it's enough, just enough to keep them occupied." "Then we're launching the strike," Hale declared. "Full power to the main guns. Zhao, make sure we hit that core." The Tempest turned once again, aligning itself with the coordinates Zhao had provided. The crew held their breath as the main guns fired one final, overwhelming shot toward the Zorvan planet's core, the energy beam slicing through space like a comet of destruction. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, a blinding flash of light erupted on the surface of the planet. The Hegemon flagship exploded in a brilliant blaze, its destruction shaking the surrounding ships. The rest of the Hegemon fleet faltered, their formations breaking apart as they attempted to regroup. "We did it," Zhao whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. The Tempest had succeeded in delivering the blow that shattered the heart of the Hegemon's power. The tide of the battle had turned. But Hale knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Zorvans had survived. But the war was far from over. The Tempest floated in the aftermath of the battle, the once chaotic space now eerily quiet. The wreckage of the Hegemon fleet drifted aimlessly, a broken reminder of the fierce confrontation that had just taken place. The Zorvans' planetary defense grid was still intact, and their forces were reorganizing, though it was clear the fight had taken its toll. The Tempest itself had been battered, but it still held together, barely. Captain Hale stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the remnants of the enemy fleet. The battle was over for now, but the victory felt hollow. They had won, yes, but they had only won a single battle in what was shaping up to be a long, bloody war. The Hegemon's resources were vast, and their resolve unyielding. The crew had done what they could, but Hale knew that it was only a matter of time before the Hegemon returned with even more force. "Damage report," Hale ordered, his voice steady, but tinged with the exhaustion of the past few days. "Shields at 12%, Granger responded, eyes scanning his console. "We've sustained heavy damage to the outer hull, and the engine's barely holding on. We can move, but we can't take another hit like that." Hale exhaled sharply, feeling the weight of their losses. Despite the hard-won victory, they had no time to rest. "Can we get back to Earth with these conditions?" Granger's face was drawn, the strain evident. "At best, we'll make it to the nearest colony. But Earth's a long way off, Captain. We'd be sitting ducks if the Hegemon caught us out here in our current state." Hale nodded grimly. "We'll have to make do. What about the Zorvans? Can they mount a counteroffensive?" Dr. Zhao, who had been working quietly at her console, turned to face him. "They've begun mobilizing what forces they have left. Their planetary defense grid is still operational, and they've set up a perimeter to protect their cities. But I don't think they can hold off the Hegemon alone for long. They'll need more than just the Tempest if they're going to stand a chance." "Then we'll give them what we can," Hale said, his voice resolute. "We'll send reinforcements where we can, but we need to find a way to disrupt the Hegemon's supply lines. If we don't cut off their reinforcements, this fight won't matter. The Zorvans can't win a war of attrition." Zhao nodded. "I agree. If we could get into their supply chain, we could cripple them. But their fleets are too large to just infiltrate. We need a more tactical approach." "That's what we'll work on," Hale said, rubbing his temples in frustration. "We've got to stay one step ahead." A sudden beeping sound interrupted their conversation. Granger's eyes widened as he looked at the radar. "Captain, I've got something. No, someone. On approach. It's another ship. Zorvan design, but it's not ours. It's different." Hale stood up straighter, a new sense of urgency rushing through him. "What do you mean, different?" Granger didn't hesitate. "It's much larger than anything we've seen from them. It's got more weapons, more energy signatures, and it's coming straight toward us." The hairs on the back of Hale's neck stood on end. "Are we sure it's friendly?" Zhao's voice cut through the tension. "It's broadcasting Zorvan IFF codes. But this is something new, something they've been hiding from us. We have to be cautious." Granger adjusted his sensors, and the display flickered as the unknown ship came into clearer focus. It was enormous, far larger than any standard Zorvan warship. Its hull was sleek and dark, with angular, almost predatory lines that suggested a new, advanced level of technology. The ship's energy signature was immense, dwarfing anything the crew had seen from the Zorvans thus far. "Whatever that is," Granger muttered, "it's not just some backup ship. That thing looks like it's got a military purpose, and a dangerous one at that." The bridge fell into silence as they watched the approaching ship. Hale's mind raced. The Zorvans had kept something hidden from them. They had been relying on the planet's defense grid and the remnants of their military to survive, but this new ship suggested there was more to the Zorvan resistance than they had been told. "What's their status?" Are they hailing us? Hale asked, his eyes not leaving the screen. They're broadcasting a tight beam transmission, Granger replied. I'm patching it through. The screen flickered, and a familiar Zorvan face appeared on the display. It was Commander Velara, the same Zorvan leader who had sent the initial distress signal. But she didn't look like the same person. Her face was drawn, tired, and there was a hard edge to her expression, one that spoke of a great deal of pain and loss. Captain Hale, Velara's voice crackled through the speakers. I apologize for the secrecy, but we had to act. The ship you see before you is the Sentinel. It is the last hope of our people. The Hegemon thought they had wiped us out, but we've been building something for this very moment. Hale narrowed his eyes. What do you mean, something? What is this ship? Velara's face hardened. This is our counteroffensive. We're ready to strike back at the Hegemon. But we need your help, Captain. Our people cannot survive without it. The screen flickered as Commander Velara's image remained steady, her eyes intense as she spoke. The Hegemon thought they had destroyed our people, Captain Hale. They didn't know that we were hiding something. Something far beyond anything they anticipated. The Sentinel is more than a ship. It's a weapon. A last-ditch effort to reclaim our freedom. Hale stared at the screen, processing the weight of her words. He knew the Zorvans were desperate. But this was something entirely different. The ship in question, the Sentinel, was an advanced warship, one that seemed capable of turning the tide in ways they hadn't expected. But it was clear that whatever this weapon was, it came at a cost. The Zorvans weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were about to launch a full-scale assault on the Hegemon, with the Sentinel at its heart. Tell me more about this weapon, Velara, Hale said, his voice steady despite the growing sense of urgency. What are we up against? Velara took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. The Sentinel harnesses the power of our entire planetary core. It's an energy weapon like no other, capable of decimating entire fleets in a single strike. But using it comes with a price. If we fire it, the planet's core will destabilize. It will tear apart the last remnants of our civilization. We will have nothing left after it's fired. Hale's mind raced. They were being asked to make an impossible choice. The Zorvans were offering their most powerful weapon, but it would come at the cost of everything they had fought for. If they fired the Sentinel, they could defeat the Hegemon, but the planet would be lost forever. Is there no other option? Hale asked, his voice strained. Is there no way we can fight back without sacrificing everything? Velara's eyes softened for a brief moment. We've tried everything else, Captain. The Hegemon doesn't stop. They will destroy us all if we don't take drastic action. The Sentinel is our only chance. Hale turned toward his crew, their faces grim as they watched the conversation unfold. They were on the verge of making history, but at what cost? There was no easy decision here, no way to save everyone. But if they didn't act soon, the Hegemon would come back in force. The Zorvans had no choice but to risk everything. Turning back to Velara, Hale made up his mind. We'll help you. We'll provide cover for the Sentinel as you prepare to launch your attack. But we'll need to move quickly. The Hegemon will be coming for us again. We're ready, Captain, Velara replied, her voice filled with determination. We've waited too long for this. We'll strike at the heart of the Hegemon, and we'll make sure they never threaten us again. The decision was made. The Tempest would fight alongside the Sentinel, their last hope in the battle against the Hegemon. The bridge of the Tempest was alive with energy as the crew worked quickly to prepare for the final assault. Granger was already rerouting power to the ship's remaining weapons, ensuring that the crew could hold off any incoming enemy ships while the Zorvans powered up their weapon. We need to draw their fleet away, Granger said, his voice urgent. If we don't, the Sentinel won't have a chance to fire. They'll be on us before we can even get close. Agreed, Hale replied, his mind racing through their options. We'll use every remaining fighter we have. We'll engage them head-on, keep their fleet occupied long enough to buy Velara the time she needs. The crew moved with precision, launching the remaining fighters and organizing the defensive lines. The battle wasn't over, but the Zorvans now had a powerful ally in the Sentinel. It was humanity's last chance to prevent the Hegemon from tightening its grip on the galaxy. "Fighters are ready," Granger called, his hands flying across the console. "We'll need to hold the line for as long as possible." The countdown to the final battle began. The Tempest moved into position, aligning itself with the Sentinel as the massive Zorvan ship powered up, its core beginning to hum with an almost unnatural energy. Hale felt the weight of the moment on his shoulders. This would be their greatest gamble. They were about to unleash a weapon that could change the course of the war, and perhaps destroy the Zorvans' homeworld in the process. "Let's make sure it's worth it," Hale muttered to himself. He turned back to the viewports, watching as the Hegemon's ships began to regroup. Their fleet was formidable, but now they faced an enemy more determined than ever. With the Sentinel on their side, the Tempest was ready to give everything they had. But it wouldn't be enough without a final decisive strike. "Prepare for battle," Hale ordered. "We finish this now. For the Zorvans. For humanity." The ship surged forward, and the last stand began.